Welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the monthly live mineral webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, the Paris School of Mines, and Blue Cap Productions. Tune in on the first Wednesday of every month and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live. Hello and welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the world's favorite mineral talk show on the internet. Today is Wednesday, June 4th, and believe it or not, this is our 99th episode. That's right. Raquel, Eloise, and I have been doing this program since 2020. We're still having a great time, and we hope that you are too. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to the show. Mineral Talks Live is the monthly mineral talk show where on the first Wednesday of every month, we sit down face-to-face with some of the best curatrix, curators, collectors, dealers, miners, researchers, artists, and media people in the mineral world. By having an open and casual conversation with our guests, we try to connect them to you in ways that perhaps hasn't been done before. Our hope is that something you hear on this show may end up sparking a real-life conversation with one of our guests, and who knows, maybe that begins some kind of friendship. Our Mineral Talks Live team includes Dr. Raquel Alonso Perez, the curatrix of the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, Dr. Eloise Gaillou, the director of the Paris School of Mines, and finally, me, Brian Swoboda, president of Blue Cap Productions. As you may be able to surmise, we are a majority female-owned endeavor, and that's something we're all very proud of. As I said earlier, this is our 99th episode, so if you missed any of our past programs, you can always catch the rebroadcast on our Mineral Talks Live YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@Mineral Talks Live. And when you visit our YouTube page, remember to click the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever we post a new episode. Today, I'm coming to you live from my studio here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Raquel, unfortunately, is traveling today, so her Harvard colleague, Rachel, is helping us out today. However, Eloise is with us and tuning in from Paris, but it is you, our faithful viewers, that makes this program truly an international show. In fact, if you're watching this live, go ahead and use the chat feature at the bottom of the page and tell us all where you're tuning in from right now. This chat feature will also allow you to send messages to everyone watching the live show, so we encourage you to be as active as you'd like in that chat during the show. If you happen to have any questions for our guests, go ahead and use the Q&A feature, which is located next to the chat icon, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the show. Finally, towards the end of the program, you'll see a window pop up on your screen. This is our Quickfire 5 questions segment to see how well all of you know our guests. So test your knowledge, play along, and who knows, we may have a good icebreaker for you next time you see our guest in person. Now, on to today's guests. Personally, my favorite color of the rainbow is green. It's one of those paradoxical colors that's generally soothing. However, if you get the right hue of it, it's also very exciting. That's why emerald has always been my favorite gemstone. However, there's another gemstone that gives emerald a run for its money. And that gemstone is Tsavorite, which is even a lot more fun to say than emerald. Now, when it comes to the story of Tsavorite, there's one family name that's so intertwined with the stone's history to the point that their stories are one and the same. From the discovery of the stone to its naming and its future, the Bridges family is nearly synonymous with the stone itself. So it is my great pleasure to welcome to our show the president of Bridges Tsavorite, Mr. Bruce Bridges. Bruce, how are you, my friend?
Hi, Brian. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. Certainly appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, and hopefully we have some fun.
Oh, no, hopefully about it. We're definitely going to have some fun, Bruce. And thank you for taking the time. I know you have a crazy schedule and you're traveling virtually nonstop, so I really appreciate you carving time out of your schedule to be with us today.
Of course, happy to do so.
Now, Bruce, you spent your early years growing up in Kenya And my understanding is that your father discovered the scorpion mine in about 1979, close to the year that you were born.
Yeah.
So growing up, how often would you take that 7-hour trip from Nairobi out to the scorpion mine?
Well, I actually grew up a lot at the scorpion mine because while I went to school in Nairobi,
Mm-hmm.
any family break, any holiday that was long enough, we would go down there and I would spend basically the whole summer down there as well. So, I mean, my father, and also I didn't go to school until I think I was 5. I didn't go to pre-K or any of that good stuff. So I
Okay.
basically spent a lot of those early years growing up. I mean, even in nappies down there at the mine. So how much time I spent there? I don't know, maybe a third to half of my formative years growing up. So a
My
long time.
God. Now,
And
it's interesting because it's almost like the Swiss Family Robinson. You lived in a place where elephants were literally wandering around your living space. What was that like? I mean, that was your normal, but for the rest of the world, that's kind of that's out there.
yeah, very, very much so. I mean, you have to remember that that area when my father first discovered Tsavorite in Kenya, which was 1970, that area was a hunting block. And since it was a hunting block, there were no people out there. So it was just rife with animals. And then they made hunting illegal in Kenya a few years thereafter. But 79, still, there was almost no one out there. When he discovered the Scorpion mine, and he discovered GG1 in 70, so that's Green Garnet 1, and then Green Garnet 2, Green Garnet 3. And then Scorpion mine wasn't until 79, but still hunting had only been outlawed for a little over 5 years. And at that stage, there were still a ton of animals in the area. There was always some poaching, but nowhere near what it became in, let's say, the mid to late 1980s. So growing up there as a little kid, you definitely would have animals of all sorts, and not just elephants. I mean, leopards, lion, of course, where we're from in Taita. We're right next to the Tsavo National Park and in the Tsavo region. And the Tsavo region is very famous for its man-eating lions. If anybody's ever read Man-Eaters of Tsavo by Patterson, it's about
Right.
basically a group of lions that ended up killing over 375 people, I believe, in the area.
Didn't they make a movie out of that with
They did. It was called Ghost in the Darkness. It was with
Ghost? Yeah.
Val
Yeah,
Kilmer
Val Kilmer.
and
Right.
Michael Douglas. And
Mm-hmm.
his character was kind of added in, and they took some let's say liberties with the original story. But yeah, that's set literally in my neck of the woods. So lions, snakes. I mean, name the scorpion mine for a reason. We get huge scorpions down there, big guys up to 8, 9 inches in length. So needless to say, you check your shoes in the morning. I mean, I even grew up with wild pets. I had a Impala called Friday that we found in her birthing sack. And yeah, that's Friday. A pride of lions had chased away her herd. And we found her literally in the birthing sack, and it was on a Friday. That's why her name was Friday, and we raised her from just a little thing. And anyone who's seen me lecture, I always say that it's funny. Her favorite meals were hobnobs, biscuits, and spaghetti, which I don't really think are on the Impala diet plan, but she'd steal them from the table just like a dog and run off. And she could jump 8 feet vertically, run probably 55 miles an hour, I'd say. You never catch her, of course.
Yeah.
And we even had a resident elephant that my father nicknamed Sickies, which was basically, he wasn't the biggest elephant. He was called Sickies because he was about 6 tons. But either way, that's bigger than the family dog, right? So he would hang out by the camp and steal our water. And honestly, he never hurt anyone. And he was with us for years and years. There were a couple mock charges every now and then. But interestingly, he really loved sisal plants. So a sisal plant is very similar to the agave in Arizona. It's one reason I
Okay.
like Arizona is because the sort of semi-arid area that I have my home in here is very similar to what I grew up with at the mine. And it's sisal you actually make rope from, and it's very similar to agave with fronds and spikes at the end. And for elephants, it's like catnip. They'll rip it up from the root, turn it upside down, and they eat it. It looks like a big pineapple when they eat it, but they just love that. And obviously, it creates a little havoc around the camp when he raids the water tank and drinks basically the week's worth of water that we and the men would need for the week. But
Now
I
you would have to like truck in the water.
my father actually created big water catchment areas where
Okay.
in El Nino, we would collect water, and he had big underground reservoirs and what we like to affectionately call the swimming pool. For anybody who's actually been to the mine, it's not a swimming pool, it's just a big water catchment area that my dad put together. No one's ever swum in there in the last 35 years that it's been there. But
Okay, but as a kid, you didn't sneak in there and swim?
I might have once or twice, but I wasn't a very good swimmer. I still don't swim very well. So I take my I'm definitely somewhat cautious, but I might have thrown on a pair of water wings or two and jumped in there.
Right on, right on. Now, one thing I love in this image, this is you on a swing with your father in the background. But the thing that really caught my attention when I saw this photo was the density of the underbrush there. And obviously, you're swinging above the area that was cleared by your father, but that whole area was that dense back when was it hunting site 66?
Yeah, it was hunting block, I believe 64. But
64. Okay, sorry.
but I don't know, well, close enough. But either way, that photo was probably taken in 85. I look about 5'6" there, I would suggest. So I
Mhm.
think that photo is from 84, 85. And you have to remember where we were, my father kept pristine. So if you
Yeah.
were to visit it even today, our camp, we didn't really cut down much vegetation, and I like to compare it to a little oasis in a very semi-arid area. And we've kept the hardwood trees on our property, et cetera, et cetera. And charcoal burning is a huge issue that you have in Kenya, where you have just devastation of the hardwood trees and flora and fauna, obviously, as well. But as you can see, it is quite dense there with the bush, and that's another reason actually why the managers of Tsavo were so successful, is because you have these lions that had great cover with the bush there, right? As you can see,
Right.
it's very
Mhm.
thick and dense. And an interesting aspect about Tsavo lions is they actually have way smaller manes than, let's say, more savanna-based lions. And the reason for that is they've sort of evolved those smaller manes so that it doesn't get hung up on the underbrush as easily as if you had a huge mane like a Barbary lion or something like that. So,
Wow, that's fascinating.
so it is very dense bush. So another issue out there with very dense bush are Cape buffaloes, right? Because Cape
Mm.
buffalo is one of your most dangerous animals in Africa, and you can be walking through the bush there and just come across one, and you wouldn't know until you literally round the corner because you can't really see that far.
That's interesting. Now, that story is going to come into play a little bit later in the interview, but I want to kind of take a look at some of these earlier pictures. Here's you with your sister Laura, correct?
Yep, yep, that's my sister Laura. So if I was 5 or 6 there. She's 2 years older, so she's 7, 8. But like I said, we grew up there, so I could send you little photos in diapers at the mine there. And I mean, honestly, when I was a teenager, because even when I went to America and I would go back every summer or every Christmas, I mean, sometimes as beautiful as it is, and thinking back when you're a teenager, maybe you don't appreciate all those things. And I
Right.
mean, you're very remote, you're in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, when you're young and dumb, you're like, hey, I want to be with my friends. I wanna maybe hang out with buddies and that sort of stuff. But now I look at those days as the best of my life.
Yeah, indeed. And looks like you guys were put to work here at the Scorpion Mine.
Yeah, dad definitely was dad definitely was one that he wasn't hands off, right? So with dad, you had to learn everything and do everything from start to finish, whether it was digging, jackhammer, whatever it is. And I mean, yeah, that's the full size shovel, but I could send you some photos where I'm on like a mini shovel, mini pick and chisel, and I
Oh,
actually have
mini
my
shovel
own.
was just the first week. Then you graduated to the full size shovel because you needed to earn your keep.
Exactly. And I mean that was something that dad actually got me a mini jackhammer that I was on. So I was on like a 30 pounder that basically is a handheld upright for doing the face in a tunnel, but that was like my main jack because you're just a little guy, you can't handle an 89, 90 pound jack. So yeah, dad wanted us to learn every aspect of the industry. And I mean, even driving down, you mentioned the drive, and it is quite a hike from Nairobi, depending on road conditions, can be anywhere from sort of 6 to 9 hours. It really depends on what the traffic's like, if there's an accident, road conditions. But of course, there's sightseeing with animals, and you play all those games. But I mean, Dad would have us recite refractive indices of gemstones for hours upon hours,
Wow. Okay.
go over crystallography and everything else. So, like I said, he wanted us to know every aspect, and he didn't force us to be in the business, but he wanted
Mhm.
to make sure that if it is something that we chose, we knew every aspect.
Sure. Now, were you able to form any other interests or hobbies outside of what your father was doing with the mining?
Sure, sure. So, I was a big track and field guy, and I was big into boxing as
Into
well as
boxing.
tennis as well. Yeah. So my
This is the
father
guy to have
was.
on your side during the bar fights.
Yeah, yeah. So my father actually fought professionally. So he was an extremely good boxer. He was a welterweight,
Okay.
and so
Wow.
he started me boxing from a little kid. And then my family actually were always big track and field guys for generations. So my claim to fame in my family, I'm the only male in multiple generations not to make an Olympic team. So I made two Olympic trials and I ran Division One track for 5 years in the US, but I never actually made a team. So that's my claim to fame.
Well, hey, but I mean, just qualifying for tryouts is a huge success story right there.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was fun while I did it, and I'm glad to say I did it. And while I was in Arizona, I was the fastest man there as a 100-meter man. So that was my passion, and that's what I love to do. But as far as hobbies, very much into track. So, and that was definitely, I mean, we just sort of realized that I was faster than everybody else from a young age. And my father had me racing from just a little kid. So I was actually Kenyan national champion junior in the juniors division in my age group from 6 through when I left, so up to 12. And then I came to America when I was 13, so I no longer competed in junior nationals after that.
Right. But you guys also, I think your father started a track and field program at the school that you were attending in Nairobi, correct?
That's some good research. So
Hey, we only
yeah,
do top notch research here at Mineral Talks Live.
yeah. That's some really good research. I mean, you and I sort of joked before this that I don't really like to talk about myself.
And I
So
told you, we're going to
and
talk about you, Bruce.
and I said I would do my best job at evasion, but that is very, very good research. So yes, I was, like I said, I was junior national champion in sprints in every age group, some from 6 through 12 when I was in Kenya. And then my father decided that I needed to have more of a challenge. So he developed at the school what was called the bandathlon, which was basically like a modern day like a modern day pentathlon. So it was multiple events. So you'd have long jump, shot put, 100 meters. You'd have an 800. You'd have a 200. You'd have high jump. So it was multiple events. Obviously, not like a decathlon because there's no pole vault, and not like a heptathlon because there wasn't hurdles, but it was every other track and field event. And then he sponsored the prize for that, etc. And it ended up being called the bandathlon. And I think to this day, it's still contested at the school that I grew up going to in Kenya, which was Banda School.
Okay.
And yeah, so if you look back, I think on the plaque, I'm the first winner of the bandathlon. So it is there, but that's quite a good amount of research, man. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Okay, so you say you were the first in a few generations. You're implying that your father and maybe your grandfather were
Yeah,
Olympic
so
runners?
my grandfather was a very good sprinter, and then my uncle actually made the South African Olympic team. And he didn't end up going to the Olympics because South Africa was banned from taking place. And my father was a better track and field guy than my uncle. And keep in mind, my uncle raced Roger Bannister and all those guys. And I mean, there's a big picture of him in his house in Palm Beach if you would visit, and there's him and Bannister crossing the finish line. So he made the South African Olympic team for the 880 and um, then the 440 relay. And then my father was even better than him, but and they grew up in South Africa. So
Okay.
since South Africa was banned from taking place in the Olympic Games, my father quit track and field and then focused more on boxing. But
Okay.
it's something that, and then my mother as well was asked to be on the U.S. Olympic development team for swimming as well. And her parents actually nixed that. They said no, they didn't want their daughter to get into sport at that higher level. But either way, it's something that runs very deep on both sides of my family, and
Right
especially
on.
my father's side in track and field.
So, Bruce, what was your PR for the 100 meter?
I was a 10:30 guy, so
Wow. That's amazing. My son, we talked about this before. My son he's a sprinter and his PR is 11.5. But,
that's good.
we're quite proud of that. But wow,
No, that's good.
that's a great time.
Thank you, thank you. No, I mean it's not what guys are running these days, but there've been a lot of advancements
Right.
in in track, synthetic tracks, as well as spikes with carbon fiber plates and stuff. But it was pretty decent for the time.
Right on. Well, okay. So now, Bruce, you had mentioned going back to America, and I always assumed that you were born in Nairobi, but recently I learned that was not the case. Your mother, Judith, actually returned to the U.S. for your birth, and I'm assuming for Laura's as well. Tell us about that.
Sure. So my mother is American. She's been in Africa since the 60s, but she's American. She's from Illinois. My
Mhm.
father's family has been in Africa for over three generations and started in Tanganyika, and so Tanganyika is when the island of Zanzibar joined the mainland of Tanganyika, it became Tanzania. So Tanganyika was basically Tanzania minus Zanzibar prior to the union. So we started in Tanganyika, and my grandfather actually did a lot of the geological mapping of Tanganyika in the early years in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and then moved down south. And then my father made his way back up to East Africa again decades later, but grew up in South Africa. However, my mother grew up in Illinois, in Peoria, Illinois.
Peoria. Yeah.
So when it was, so my father only ever lived in Africa, never lived anywhere else, but he was actually born in London. And he was born in London because his mother wanted him to be born in London and, and to be a UK citizen. My uncle was actually born in South Africa. They didn't make it back in time.
Mm-hmm.
But my father was born in London, then moved back at 2 months old. And then for me, when it came time for his children to be born, my father's children to be born, as in Laura and I, he very much wanted us to be US citizens, even more so than my mom, who is a US citizen and was born in the United States. So my mom came over to the US for both Laura and myself and had us in the US. And then we went back to Kenya at 2 months old, similarly to what his mom had done a generation before, just going to the UK. So
Sure.
with that being the case, I am a US citizen, as is my sister. We were both born here. And then again, moved over at 2 months old and moved back at 2 months old. And when I asked my father why, and obviously I'm very happy that he made that choice, and
Hmm.
obviously that's fantastic that he gave me that opportunity in life. But I remember when I asked him once, I said, "Why was it so important to you, even more so than mom, to have me in the US?" And my father said, "Well, in case you wanted to be president of the United States someday." And that was way before I understood how anything worked. And I
Sure.
thought that was an interesting comment that he made because I was pretty young when he said that. I didn't realize about naturalization and everything else. So I'm like, huh, that's that's quite interesting. Never had any designs on that, but that's what was going through his head at the time.
Well, I mean, but it's interesting because if you look at articles online, they talk about which passports give you the most amount of freedom traveling around the world, and US passports always rank towards the top of the list there. So I think that was a
Yeah.
very, very wise thing.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, I have multiple passports, but I do use my US passport more than any other.
Sure. Okay. So you came back to Kenya when you were 2 months old, just like your father, being born in London and coming back to Africa. Um, and then you grew up in Kenya, but then for high school, you ended up going to school in Virginia.
Yeah, yeah. So I went to school in just outside of Washington, actually. I went to so Northern Virginia, and anybody basically how it works is the educational system when I was growing up in Kenya was fantastic, sort of kindergarten through prep school.
Yeah.
And those that could generally would go overseas for secondary school. Almost everybody for university that could would go to university, but a lot of people who could um, went overseas, and generally it was the UK. Sometimes it was South Africa. With my mother's American connection, it was American. My father always felt that the US was the world's superpower and the most powerful country, and better to understand how that system works than let's say the UK, which if you go back 100 years, his family was from.
Hmm.
So he felt the US would be the best place for my sister and I. And like I said, the educational system was extremely good in Kenya growing up. And I remember when I came to the US, which would have been at about 13, I was about 2 years ahead of what they were studying in
Wow.
class. And it was, for me, it was a huge culture shock, right? Because keep in mind, I've spent a lot of my time growing up at the mine or at the house in Nairobi. I didn't grow up, we didn't have TV until, I mean, we had VOK, which was Voice of Kenya, but Voice of Kenya was interesting because it only came on once a day, and then you had signal bars for the rest of the day. And
Okay.
it was pretty much in Swahili for most of that, and it was black and white. So I didn't have proper television aside from when I would come to the US maybe once every other year or so to visit my mother's family. I didn't really have any local TV growing up until I want to say KTN, which was Kenya Television Network, started in 1990, and that was the first color television that we had that actually had programming.
Oh my God.
And so when I came to the US, I didn't know the music, I didn't know the clothes, and I spoke English really, really slowly. So it's something that you still probably think I speak slowly. And I mean, we spoke English in the household, but it's definitely at a slower pace. And so understanding people in the US, especially on the East Coast, which is another reason I think I like the Southwest, maybe the Western United States.
It's wicked cold out there.
Yeah, well, it's a little slower here too, right? People speak a little more slowly. And in the East, especially sort of DC, New York, they're sort of rapid firing all these English words at me.
Oh,
And so
sure.
I'd have to pause and sort of think what they were saying. Then my brain would eventually catch up. And I don't think I fully adapted, but I've definitely gotten much faster than when I came to the US. But it was a massive culture shock for me. And going back to the education, the reason we were about 2 years ahead is because the way that the English and African systems teach is they're very big on learned information and written information, and there's not really much discussion. So I had taken in a lot of information, but what I noticed the big difference in academia in the United States is it's big on discussion, classroom debate, etc., as opposed to over there, at least when I was growing up, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was growing up, if you spoke out in class, that's not going to turn out too well for you, right?
You get the
So
switch.
yeah, yeah. And there was definitely corporal punishment when I was growing up.
Yeah. Well, for all of us our age, I mean, it was corporal punishment was that was
Even in the
normal.
US.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I think
Interesting.
it's like my generation growing up when we became parents, it was kind of like that was the backlash against spanking the kids.
Interesting. Interesting. That's interesting to know. But did you grow up with discussion in classroom or no?
Um, Hard to say because I was always the disturbing element in class, and so I
Okay.
was told to often shut up. So I would personally say that the discussions were always shot down.
Interesting.
For other students, maybe it was more open, but I think it was, it was more shut up and just parrot what we teach you.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting aspect. I mean, I do vividly remember, though, all the open discussion in class, and I was thinking, well, why is it taking us a month to get through this chapter when in Africa we would have been through this in like a week?
Yeah.
But on the flip side of it, your general public speaking and discussion and debate is definitely set back a great deal if you don't have that. So again, I'm not trying to say when I came here I was 2 years ahead, and the, the U.S. system, the educational system was terrible. Not at all. It's just very different, and the way that it's structured to teach is very different. And I mean, a strong argument could be made that in general life, you need to be able to talk and debate and discuss more than knowing, let's say, the Pythagorean theorem or something to that effect, you know. So there's pros and cons to both, I guess. But it was just interesting, but a huge adjustment for me. And another huge adjustment health-wise, because in Kenya, I was used to all the bugs and stuff over there. So, for instance, my stomach is extraordinarily durable. I hardly would ever get a stomach bug almost anywhere I go. But as
Mhm.
far as upper respiratory, we don't really have changing seasons in Kenya. So you get to
Oh, okay.
Virginia where the climate can change 30 degrees in a day. I've never imagined anything like that before. You have changing seasons, and I was very sick for a long, long time. So basically missed most of my most of my high school time. I remember that
Wow.
in high school the prize I won, well, not prize, but in the yearbook I was voted most likely to be absent. So I guess Jeff Spicoli would be proud of that, right?
Yeah, right, dude. Cool,
Yeah,
man.
exactly. But I wasn't undertaking Spicoli's extracurricular. I was just sick.
Yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah. That just because we're recording this,
yeah,
it's the old I never inhaled.
yeah.
Okay, so right after high school, did you go on to university at U of A there in Tucson?
Eventually. So
Eventually, there was a gap.
yeah, so like I said, I was really, really sick
Right.
in high school and I actually developed common variable immunodeficiency syndrome, which you're not meant to get over. And it's basically when your body quits producing antibodies, and then you
Wow.
have to go on plasma to give you antibodies the rest of your life. And my mom went to NIH, went everywhere, Johns Hopkins, everywhere to see every specialist you could imagine. And then, quite honestly, people sort of make fun of me now because I live a super healthy life. Like, if anybody's been out to dinner with me, I eat pretty healthy and I don't drink and smoke and anything. But she basically just did research on homeopathic remedies and followed Dr. Weil's principles, who was a professor here at Arizona for a while, I believe, and just completely changed my diet. And within a year, I was healthy again. But either way, it's a long-winded way of saying I was meant to go to Virginia Tech when I graduated Langley High School in Virginia, but my health was so bad that we felt that I should get that under control before going to university. So I took
Right.
2 years off of university in order to get right. And within those 2 years, I just worked for my parents.
So did you go back to Kenya or did you stay in America?
Both. I mean, back
Okay.
forth. I was back and forth a lot. I was in Kenya for a lot of that time. I was also in the
Interesting.
US doing with sales and that sort of stuff as well. So I did a little bit of both, but I spent a lot of time in Kenya over those 2 years. And then the interesting thing is, after I got my health right, I uh, I said to myself, well, uh, I was fast at one point in my life, right? Because I never ran track in high school or anything, right?
Hmm.
So I never really did I never did a full season of any sport in high school. And
Okay.
keep in mind, the football coaches were pretty adamant about getting me out because even in high school, I was 6'2", 6'3", 200 pounds. And my sister was second in state in the 100 meters and first in state champion in high jump, et cetera, et cetera. So they kind of knew the family history a little bit.
Right.
So they kept coming up to me and all these guys would be like, why aren't you going out for any sports? And the thing is, I was just too sick, right? So
Mm.
even if I was big and strong, I just was too sick to do anything. So then after I got my health right a year or so after graduating high school, that's really thanks to my mom. My mom really saw me through there. I said, I was Kenyan national champion once. Let's see what I can do. So um, trained for a couple months and won and ran 10.5 and then started to talk to universities and then started to get universities wanting to see me and have me out. And I was looking at Stanford, USC, Arizona, UCLA, and Florida, and ended up at Arizona.
Fantastic. Okay. So during that time before you ended up in Arizona, you were still working with your father. And then when you went to U of A, what was your major?
My major originally was management information systems, so it was a business major, but with a focus on tech, right?
Okay.
Because Arizona at the time was number two or three in management information systems. My father felt that would be a good major, and I remember when I was going to university, I asked my father, "Hey, what should I do?" And and my dad said, "Well, you've been in the gem and mineral industry your whole life, and I've taught you geology and everything else," and he was never overly pleased with my geological abilities, but not all not all people are created equal, right? I certainly tried
Right.
as much as I could, but my father's mind was like a galaxy. I mean, it had everything in there. But with that being the case, he said, don't do something in geosciences. Why don't you do something in business? So he felt that tech would be one of the most successful sectors going forward. So he said they're number two, number three in the United States. Go into that, try that. Then after a while, after my first year, I decided I didn't like that so much. And then I became a finance and marketing major. So my father also said, hey, at least stay in the businesses, and finance is always good. And then marketing, if you're going to do what I do, is always good for the business as well. So learn a skill set that you don't already have is basically where he was going with his advice. And again, he never forced me to do anything. I
Sure.
could have
Yeah.
been any kind of major that I liked. I mean, as you know, I really like photography and videography, but I was a finance and marketing major, so.
Okay. Well, then now eventually you went back to Kenya. I think it was around 2005. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I graduated university in '04 and ran in the Pac-10 championships. That was my last race in university. Finished my career at Arizona. And then when I graduated, actually, my father didn't say come back into the family business. He said, hey, you've been in the family business your whole life. Why don't you do something else? And why don't you give it a try? Because, like I said, he never forced the business on my sister or I.
Right.
And he always gave us opportunities to try anything that we might like. And with that being said, I actually worked for Merrill Lynch for a year and a half or so after graduating university. So he said, "Why, since you have a finance major, why don't you go into finance?" So I was basically, I literally was a financial advisor for Merrill Lynch for a year and a half or so. And then in 2005. So I did that, like I said, about a year and a half. And then I decided after I've had a taste of it, that staring at a computer screen wasn't all day long, wasn't really what I wanted to do. So then I went to my father and I said, hey, can I come into the family business? Can I come back into the family business? And he
Awesome.
said, of course. So then
That
that
was
would
the
have been
start of
late
next
'05.
chapter in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, late '05. But the funny thing is, even at Merrill, when I was working there, I mean, you never really leave the family business, so you're always
Right.
somewhat involved. And I mean, Dad would say, "Hey, I need you to go see this client here or that client there." So let's say on a weekend or a day off or whatever, I might take a trip someplace to go see somebody. So you're always in there a little bit. I don't think any family business you're completely out of.
Totally. I get it. I get it. So let's talk a little bit about the family business and let's talk about your father, Campbell Bridges. And for the two people watching who don't know Campbell Bridges, among your father's most important accomplishments were centered around what is considered to be two major gemstones, Tanzanite and Tsavorite,
Yeah.
and how they're both linked to your father and Tiffany Company.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a story about Tanzanite first, since it
Okay.
also ties into one of the legends of our mineral collecting world, Paul Desautel's.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, lots of fantastic history there. So, as I mentioned earlier, my family started in what was Tanganyika, then moved down south. My father was educated in South Africa, and then And my grandfather as well. He was actually chief geologist at Central Mining, which at the time was one of the biggest mining houses in the world. And his specialty were diamonds and precious metals.
Hmm.
So, and he was Dr. Bridges, and then my father, um, from just a young age, I believe my father's first actually mine was at 6 years old when he discovered an amethyst mine on the family plot in South Africa, which knowing dad, he definitely would have been chiseling away and mining every day. But with that history behind it, um, my father then moved north and he moved to East Africa from Southern Africa in 65. And when he moved to East Africa, he was a consultant geologist and he actually was in near Arusha. He was in Merlani area and he was brought several blue samples of a gemstone. And the guy that brought them to him was selling them as blue sapphire. But my father looked at them and he said, this to himself, he said, this definitely isn't blue sapphire. I'll buy them anyway. It
Hmm.
it looks like zoisite to me, but I've never seen a blue zoisite before. So so at that point, after my father acquired them, he said to himself, I'm going to take this to the US and see what these truly are, because there was no very sophisticated lab in Africa at the time.
Okay.
And so he went to the GIA in the US and he met with Crashes and Crowning Shield, who were senior fellows at the GIA at the time. And he said, hey, hey, Robert and Bert, I have these samples that are just came out of Tanzania, and I've never seen them before. Nobody else that I know has identified or seen these before, and they were sold to me as blue sapphire. However, I know they're not. They look like blue zoisite, but I've never seen blue zoisite. Have you guys seen anything like this before? And Crashes and Crowning Show both said no. This is quite something. We haven't seen. We're not sure, quite sure what this is, but let's run some test results. Let's run some labs on them, see what we get back. And lo and behold, they did their testing. They came back and called up my dad and they said, "Hey Campbell, your hunch was right. This is a blue zoisite. We've never seen it before.
Wow.
It's amazing material. And you know what you should do is you should go to Harry Platt at Tiffany and Company, who at that time was vice president of Tiffany and Company, later to become president of Tiffany and Company. And Harry Platt's a very forward-thinking individual who is always looking for something interesting and the next great thing to bring to market. So why don't you take these to him and show him and see what he thinks? So on Crowning Shield and Crash's suggestion and advice, he went over to Tiffany and Company and met with Mr. Platt and when he met with him, he said, "Hey Harry, I have these samples of blue zoisite here. So they're the first samples in the United States. GIA has never seen them before, but they just verified it's blue zoisite. Is this something that you might be interested in?" And that's Harry
Now, this
Platt.
is your father with Harry. I don't think
Yep.
that they're looking at the zoisite, but I just
No,
wanted
no,
to.
that's
This is the Tsavorite.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
Sav right there. I do have actually a really nice photo of Platt, Bruce Cummings, and my father looking at zoisite. But either way, that's Harry on the left, and then my father with the beard, on my left at least.
Mhm.
And with uh, with that, Mr. Platt said, "Well, Campbell, this is very interesting. This material looks lovely, but how much of this material is there?" My father said, I don't know. These are the first samples that have come up. I don't know. Maybe when I go back to Tanzania, if there's material coming out, I'll have a better idea of exactly how much of this we can procure. So Mr. Platt said, well, Campbell, this material, while lovely, it's not enough for me to be interested and get the interest of Tiffany and Company. I suggest you take this over to the Smithsonian and see Dr. Paul Desautel,
Mm.
and who was curator of the Smithsonian. And why don't you show him? I'm sure they would love to have this. Then if you get back to Tanzania and you find that there's a lot of this material coming out, you let me know and maybe we can do something. So then as you see the chain from GIA to Tiffany and Company now to Desautel's, my father on Harry's advice went to see Dr. Desautel's and went and he said, hey, Paul, look at this new material. This is blue zoisite that's coming out of Tanzania. They're the first samples in the United States. The GIA just confirmed that. And I just showed Harry Platt, who recommended I bring them to you. Is this something you would be interested in? And Dr. Desautel obviously was extraordinarily interested in them. And he said, of course, Campbell, I'd love to have this material. So they made a deal, and anybody that knew my father would know that he really didn't like to sell gemstones. He was much more into the romance, adventure, and magic of gems. So he actually traded.
Passion of the pursuit.
Exactly, the passion of the pursuit. He actually traded the first samples of blue zoisite in the United States for a portion of the Smithsonian's tourmaline collection. And to this day, I still have the Smithsonian box with a multitude of various colors of tourmaline, still Smithsonian, everything. I still have that in my father's private collection, something I'd never sell. I've shown it one time. And
I would love to see that.
And it's something that is just a piece of history, that is a very fond memory, of course, for the family and something that I cherish. So then the interesting thing is Dad left the Smithsonian with a portion of their tourmaline collection. The Smithsonian had the first samples of blue zoisite to enter the United States and being identified in the United States as well. And so then my father went back to Tanzania. When he got back to Tanzania, he saw that the Tanzanite rush was in full effect. So he immediately called Harry Platt and he said, hey, Harry, a lot of this material is coming out. I could procure this for you if it's something you're interested in. To which Harry Platt, again, very forward-thinking individual, he jumped at the opportunity and he said, you know what, Campbell, I love that material. Let's do it. He made my father Tiffany and Company's official consultant on Tanzanite. And during those early years of Tanzanite's discovery, my father was the individual providing Tiffany and Company with all of their Tsavorite. So, and then Platt, again, very forward-thinking, great at marketing. He utilized Elizabeth Taylor for a lot of their marketing for Tanzanite. If you remember, Elizabeth Taylor had those beautiful lavender, sort of violet blue eyes, which is
absolutely
very akin to the color of Tanzanite. As Tanzanite is a blue stone, but it has that touch of lavender, right? Touch of violet in there. And then Harry named it Tanzanite because blue zoisite's not the most marketable name, right? So it was something that relationship then that my father developed with Tiffany and Company on Tanzanite led to an immediate segue for Tsavorite when my father discovered Tsavorite just a few months later.
Now, you're going back to the water or the Cape Buffalo story. Your father discovered Tsavorite in Rhodesia, which I believe is modern day Zimbabwe. Tell us the story about how he first discovered Tsavorite there and then later found it in Tanzania and then in Kenya.
Sure. So the official discovery of Tsavorite is by my father in '67 in Tanzania. But he actually first came across Tsavorite in 1961 in what was then Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And he was working for the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority on beryl deposits, as they felt that beryllium would be the best liner for nuclear reactors. Millions of pounds later, they found out stainless steel worked just as well. But either way, that's why he was there. And then he had seen a range of hills during his exploits there that had very, very interesting and unique geology. And my father just had a feeling that there was something special in that range of hills. So on one of his days off, he drove to the base of the range of hills and got out of his Land Rover, and he started to make his way up the hillside, prospecting as he went. And of course, when you're prospecting, you're looking at the ground for most of the time, and you'll scan the bush every now and then, but you have to really look for tiny fragments. So you really have to keep your attention fixed on the ground. And out of the bush, it was quite thick bush, he recalled, a lone rogue Cape buffalo charged at him. And the lone rogues are always the most dangerous buffaloes, because the interesting thing is, let's say you were driving along and you came to a herd of buffalo. You could actually jump out of the car and run at them if they're in a big herd, and 9 out of 10 times they're going to run away.
Okay.
If you do that to a lone rogue, you're going to become paint. So it's a very different attitude. I don't advise anybody do that on safari, but I can attest to the fact that I have run at many buffalo herds and they will run away. I have never ever run at a rogue and have him run away. So with that being said, this Cape buffalo charged at my father out of the bush, and thankfully there was a very steep gully next to where my father was standing, and he, at the last second, dove into the ravine to evade the buffalo. Thankfully, it was steep enough that the buffalo couldn't come in after him. When my father saw that, he started to traverse his way up the ravine, and the buffalo, being a rather ornery fellow, followed along the top for a ways, and then I guess he got bored and he went on his merry way after a wee bit. And my father kept prospecting as he went up the ravine, and right before he crested the hillside, a sparkling green glint caught his eye. And the sun must have caught it, and it glinted, and he bent down and he picked up a fragment of a green mineral that was unlike anything he had ever seen. And when he prospected a little more there, he found a few more pieces, and he looked at these pieces and he knew they weren't emerald. He knew they weren't chrome tourmaline. And he said to himself, these are garnets, but I've never seen a green garnet like this before. This is extraordinarily interesting. But the issue was, he was restationed by the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority and never had a chance to further investigate and explore what he had found in 61 in Zimbabwe. So it wasn't until 1967, so 6 years later, when he was in northern Tanzania, and he was just outside the village of Komolo, where he saw a range of hills that was very similar, had very similar geology to what he had seen those 6 years prior in Zim. So when my father saw that range of hills, he said to himself, I didn't have a chance to further investigate what I had found in Zimbabwe in 61, but this range of hills has extremely similar geology. Let me go and see if I can rediscover what I had discovered those 6 years prior. And lo and behold, my father went and prospected in that range of hills. It was 13 kilometers outside of the village of Komolo, now known as an area called Lemshuku, Tanzania. And he found grain samples that were exactly the same as he had found those 6 years prior. And this time he actually had the opportunity to develop what he had found into a concession and was able to mine it. So that's why the official discovery of Tsavorites by my father in 67 in Tanzania instead of 61 in what was then Rhodesia.
Okay. So he discovered it, but it was in 67 he was actually able to mine it.
And it was also the first discovery in Tanzania.
Right. So, okay. So he was mining it, and was he stockpiling it, or what was he doing with the material he was mining?
So when he first discovered the Tsavorite belt in Tanzania, he immediately went back to hairy plat. So Tanzanite was discovered in mid-67, and my father didn't discover Tsavorite in Tanzania until late 67.
Okay. Did we lose Bruce? It seems like we've paused there.
I'm still here.
Okay. Okay. Looks like your video is paused, or maybe it's me. Oh, there we go. Okay, we got you back. Okay, so mid 67 Tanzanite, late 67 Tsavorite.
Yeah. And remember how closely I said they were interrelated historically and geologically, because keep in mind, Tsavorite is a calcium aluminium silicate colored by chromium and vanadium, and Tanzanite is a calcium aluminium hydroxyl sorosilicate colored by vanadium. So chemically, they're quite very close. Similar. Yeah. On top of that, Tsavorite occurred about 150 to 200 million years earlier than Tanzanite, and under higher pressure and temperature, under prograde metamorphism versus Tanzanite. So rising pressure and temperature versus Tanzanite, retrograde metamorphism. So lowering pressure and temperature. So geologically, you can find Tanzanite and Tsavorite within a kilometer of each other. We have the sole Tanzanite mine outside of Tanzania, being our Snake Hill mine, and that is literally a kilometer away from our Scorpion mine. Wow. So it's something that and even in the same pocket, you can find Tsavorite and Tanzanite. They both will never be in gem quality. However, for instance, if you find a Tsavorite pocket, sometimes in the calphitic rim, which surrounds the Tsavorite pocket, you'll actually have zoisite. And I could show you many samples of that, many cross sections of that.
I'd love to see that.
To illustrate that. But with that being said, it's interesting because not only are they geologically very closely linked, but historically very closely linked, because it wasn't until it was because of the fact that my father had the relationship with Tiffany Co and Harry Platt on Tanzanite, that as soon as my father discovered Tsavorite, he called up Harry and he said, "I have to show you this new gemstone I discovered." He went over to the United States. And at the time, actually, he went over to the United States to ask my mom's parents for her hand in marriage. And so on the way, they stopped by in New York and they met with Harry, and he showed Harry these first samples of what was green Groschler garnet at the time, because that's what it is. It's a green Groschler garnet, right?
Right. And
Harry, upon seeing the first sample, said, "Campbell, this is everything a fine gemstone should be, and then some." And Tiffany and Company immediately became the first company to sell Tsavorite. And it was through that introduction that
okay, it sounds like we okay, I'm sorry, Bruce, you cut out for a second there. Do we have him back? I heard his voice for a second, but I still have a frozen video of him. So basically, through the relationship that was still brand new with Harry over at Tiffany and Company, your father brought these Tsavorites. I'm sure Harry's first comment was really, "Campbell, what the hell where are you making these things? Because you keep showing up with minerals of different colors that we've never seen before." But I don't think we have Bruce back yet. But at that point, Tiffany and Company started selling the Tsavorites. Are you with us? Are you back there, Bruce? Okay, it looks like our.
I'm back now, but I
Okay,
think
all right, we got you now.
I'm sorry. The last thing I heard was when you said that Harry said Campbell what, and then it sort of cut
I
off.
was making a joke. I was saying Harry's first response was, Campbell, where are you making these things? Because you keep showing up with minerals of different colors we've never seen before.
Yeah, no, my father was just the magic man, right? He
Yeah, totally, totally.
just had a
Always the
connection
right
to the
place at the right time.
earth. Yeah.
Okay, so then what happened? He had the mine in Tanzania, but then he went on to Kenya and he rediscovered it there, and that's where the Scorpion mine is. Was Did he lose that Tsavorite mine because of the nationalization of the mine of the Tanzanite mines in Tanzania? I'm not sure about what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Well, all mining in Tanzania. So Julius Nyerere, who was president of Tanzania at the time, decided that he would nationalize all mines. So he nationalized all mining ventures in the country and
Okay.
basically kicked out a good amount of the foreigners. So my father was forced to leave Kenya. I was forced to leave Tanzania, but he traced the geological strike of Tsavorite from Tanzania into Kenya. And keep in mind, we're talking about an area of the world that's very close here. So if you were to take Mount Kilimanjaro and go 100, 200 miles radius any direction, you'll have, in my opinion at least, the majority of the finest colored gemstones in East Africa. So he simply traced the Tsavorite strike from Tanzania into Kenya and then rediscovered Tsavorite in Kenya in 1970. So he's also credited for the first discovery of Tsavorite in Kenya in 1970. And then we had a series of different Tsavorite mines in Kenya, which we still have, like GG1, again, Green Garnet 1, Green Garnet 2, Green Garnet 3. So GG1, GG2, GG3. We have Ericon. We have Leopard Hill, and we have Scorpion, which Scorpion was really the mine that enabled Tsavorite to burst onto the market because several of those mines would produce very fine color, but let's say smaller sizes, or some of them would produce good quantity, but at the time in an unaccepted color, which very light material, which now is a market in what they like to call mint Tsavorite, etc. But at the time, no one was buying the light material, and we actually just put it in bags and we just had sacks of that stuff because you couldn't sell it. So now, of course, that's very helpful to me because there's a great market for it. But 50 years ago, that was you literally could not sell it. And the Scorpion mine was the first Tsavorite mine in the world that produced not only top color, quantity, clarity, as well as size to make Tsavorite a truly remarkable stone where it could be sold around the world. And in a far greater capacity. And also another aspect is all of my father's mining ventures were extremely professionally run. So we don't run it as an artisanal venture. He was a professional miner, came from a professional mining family. And with that knowledge and know-how, he was able to produce exponentially more from the same deposit as if it was mismanaged.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go back to this photo, which is, again, your father and Harry from Tiffany looking at Tsavorites. And I want you to talk to us real quickly, Bruce, about this, which is in the background over your left shoulder there.
In the background over my left shoulder. Yep. So that is, so remember that Harry Platt came up with the name Tanzanite because he needed a
All right. Sounds like we lost Bruce yet again. And we apologize for this.
better
This is just
marketing name for. Are we back yet or
Okay,
still?
yeah, we're back. We're back. Carry on,
Okay,
Bruce.
okay,
You were
good.
just saying how Harry named Tanzanite, and then you were
Yeah,
going to talk
so
about Tsavorite.
Harry named Tanzanite because obviously he needed a better name than blue zoisite to market it to the public. So while Tiffany and Company immediately started selling Tsavorite, and Harry was a huge fan of Tsavorite at the time, which was green groshla garnet. Harry came to my father in 73 and he said, "Hey Campbell, I love your discovery. I love this green gemstone. I love your green groshla garnet that you discovered, and our clients love it, and we love selling it. However, I really need a better name to market your gemstone than green groshla garnet. It's just not the most romantic name, and doesn't really roll off the tongue that well." So Harry said, "Since you discovered it, Campbell, what would you like to call it?" And interestingly, my mother already had a name picked out and she already had a slogan made up. And my mother said, "Well, I think it should be called Campbell Light. And then I think the slogan should be have a Campbell Light by candlelight." And
I love it.
yeah, and
It's like
Harry and my
Riganini
father,
on ice. That's nice.
yeah, exactly. And Harry and my father looked at each other and sort of shook their heads and were, "No, I'm not sure that that's right. I'm not sure that's the direction we want to go." And anybody that knew my father would know that he was a very humble man and would never name anything after himself anyway. So my father said, "You know what, Harry, even though I discovered this stone in Tanzania, I had to leave Tanzania and Kenya welcomed me with open arms. So I would like to name it in honor of Kenya. And we mine green groshla garnet very close to the Tsavo National Park in Kenya. And Tsavo is the largest national park in the country. It's famed for its majestic vistas and beautiful wildlife. So I would like to name the gem in honor of Kenya and the Tsavo National Park and the region of Tsavo, and call it Tsavo and name it after Tsavo." And then mineralogical nomenclature dictated that all new discoveries had to end in ITE. So Platt said, "Campbell, I like that. I think that's a good name. And since you discovered it, I'm happy to oblige if that's your wish." And they simply took Tsavo and they added the ITE and Tsavorite was born. And the rest is really history. And then what we have in front of us, so keep in mind that was 73, late 73.
Mhm.
Then in 1974, even though Tiffany and Company had been selling and working with Tsavorite for multiple years, they unveiled Tsavorite to the world in its official name as Tsavorite in this first ad. And this was the first ad that they did so. And this appeared in the New York Times and the New Yorker, as well as several other publications. And this ad is from 1974. And to my knowledge, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's true. I believe that's the last time that Tiffany and Company actually included a source in one of the ads. If you read there, where they mention teaming up with Scottish geologist Campbell Bridges. So that's a very special ad, and that is the first ad of Tiffany and Company literally introducing Tsavorite for the first time with that name to the world.
Now, Bruce, because it may be hard for our viewers to see this on the screen, I'm going to go ahead and real quickly read the ad for everybody.
Please.
Headline at the very top says Tiffany introduces Tsavorite, and the copy reads, "For centuries, only giraffes and other African animals knew about Tsavorite, an incredibly brilliant green gemstone that is far more durable and far less expensive than emeralds. Tiffany was tipped off about it 6 years ago, but it proved impossible to remove it from Tanzania, where it was found. Teaming up with Scottish geologist Campbell Bridges, who had a hunch that the vein of mineral deposit could be traced across the African range to Kenya, Tiffany pursued the tantalizing jewel. Like all good adventure stories, this one had a successful ending. Mr. Bridges was right, and the stone was rediscovered in Kenya with all its sparkling greenness intact. Tiffany named the beautiful gemstone Tsavorite for the Tsavo River and for the Tsavo National Park where it was found. Now, with the help of Tiffany's designers and craftsmen, the world's largest and finest collection of Tsavorite is finally available to all, and not just closed-mouthed giraffes. Come in and discover it for yourself. Tiffany and Company.
Yeah,
I love that.
it's a great ad.
So after this ad ran, which you said I believe was 74, your father found the Scorpion mine in 79. Is that correct?
Yeah, in 79. And it was really brought on stream in 1980. But he first found it in 79. And it was at that point that I mean an interesting quote from Platt was, well, Campbell, how many important stones can you provide me a year? And they were referring to Tsavorite. And my father said, well, Harry, what do you consider an important stone? And Harry said, well, anything that's 3 carats and up. And I'm sorry, how many important stones can you provide me a month? And Mr. Platt said, my dad said, well, Harry, what you consider an important stone? And Harry said, well, Campbell, anything that's over 3 carats, I would consider an important stone. And my father said, Harry, it's not how many 3+ carat stones I can provide you per month. It's how many I can provide you per year. So that gives you an idea of the extreme rarity of Tsavorite, especially in larger sizes.
Indeed.
And even more so in what would have been the early 1970s, shortly after discovery. And again, that was one of the reasons the Scorpion mine was such a tailwind for Tsavorite, was simply because for the first time in history, you had a mine that was actually producing larger sizes in top color. And it's something that just really made Tsavorite. If it wasn't for the Scorpion mine, Tsavorite wouldn't be what it is today.
Indeed, indeed. Let me cut to some photos here. This is your father in front of the first treehouse, the original treehouse that he built at the Scorpion mine, where he and his mother, or his mother, your mother, where he and your mother lived.
Yeah. That's actually Treehouse Hill. So that's close to the Scorpion mine, but
Okay.
that's Treehouse Hill. But you're very right, Brian. Those are the original tree houses that my mom and dad lived in for 5 years when they first discovered the area. Because remember, it was hunting block number 64, and yeah, that's a great shot. I like that shot because really you can see how there's nothing really out there as far as the eye could see, especially back then. So that photo would have been early 80s, I'm guessing. And
Okay.
what you're seeing there, again, the original tree houses, that wasn't early 70s because I can see a little ladder on the right there. And in the early days, they just had a rope. And my mom and dad literally lived in those tree houses for 5 years from when they first discovered the area. And it was literally to have protection from wildlife. And also, yeah, that's that. As you can see, it was open, little thatched roof, no door, just planks. And those planks are there just so that you don't roll out when you sleep. And interestingly, like I said, protect from wildlife. But of course, we do have leopards, and leopards are
Right.
quite known to climb. So an interesting tidbit is whenever my mom and dad used to go to the US, let's say to visit Harry and sell some of the mine production, they used to come back, and for the first couple nights there, they would get flea bitten, and they'd have to clean out the treehouse of impala and other gazelle carcasses. And for the first couple nights, a big male leopard would actually circle the treehouse, grunting and puffing. And I have to say, though, he was very respectful because he never came up when they were there. And it's almost as if he understood that they had a sort of timeshare, lease share thing there because when my mom and dad were gone, he would take over the tree. He would eat his meals. He'd leave his fleas, etc. Mom and dad would come back. They'd clean up the treehouse, maybe have a few flea bites, and then the leopard might patrol and be grumpy. But he never came up. He never tried to hurt them. He never was a pest other than maybe making them a little uneasy patrolling the bottom of the tree. So they had a good relationship.
So this was the original Airbnb.
That was the original Airbnb, interspecies Airbnb, I might add.
Right. Your father was always on the cutting edge, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so this treehouse eventually evolved into this one.
Yeah. So that's at the Scorpion Mine.
That's at the Scorpion. Okay.
Yeah, so I've kept it exactly the same. And if you were to go to this day, it would look exactly like that. I still have my dad's little Peugeot pickup truck in the background there. It looks exactly like that. As you can see, we have steps. We now have a little veranda. My father used to love to watch the sunrise and sunset from that veranda and look over Tsavorite country. And yeah, and has a door, has walls, if you can believe it. You have a mosquito net inside, and it's quite pleasant. Again, like sleeping in a ship, rocks and creaks in the wind.
Right. And I love this.
Yeah, so last year I took my family for the first time. So my wife Danielle on my right there has been to Kenya several times, but my kids who Brock on my far right is my little guy. He was 7. Bryce, my big guy, was 11, and my daughter there, Ava, was 9. She actually turned 10 in Kenya. I
Wow.
took them for the first time, so that's where I grew up, and it was wonderful to be able to share that.
I absolutely love that. I mean, it's really kind of pulling it full circle. And I'm sure that they enjoyed every single moment of it, having been inundated by stories of grandpa and all the adventures that are associated with that treehouse. Absolutely love it.
Definitely so.
So now, Bruce, 2005, that's when you ended up back down in Kenya with your father.
Mhm.
And it was a year to celebrate, but it was also a year where things started kind of taking a bit of a darker turn there.
Yeah,
Tell us briefly about the windfall discovery. You found over 25,000 carats of gem quality Tsavorite at the Scorpion mine, but then Kenya started kind of changing, and you had the encroachment of the company or mining group Tia Akili, I think I'm pronouncing that right, onto
yeah.
your property. Tell us about that a little bit.
Sure. So 2005 was a great year for production. So we actually hit the single largest Tsavorite pocket ever at the Scorpion mine, and single largest Tsavorite pocket to my knowledge ever caught on film. And this particular pocket yielded 5 kilograms or 25,000 carats of faceted gem material after it was caught. And nobody had ever seen or heard of anything like that in Tsavorite. And it was something, interestingly, like I said, my father just had a feel for the earth like none I've met before. But we had been mining in the Scorpion 2 tunnel for several months, and we were just going through a barren zone, and we were getting no material. We had just gone meter after meter after meter, no material. So I said to my dad, well, you know, I think that we should, I think that we should try going back to the Bonanza Tunnel, which historically yielded the most Tsavorite out of any single Tsavorite chute in history, which is very close by. It's at the Scorpion mine, or look at other deposits. So we went and we started mining the number 4, which is Bonanza and Ericon and CW and several other deposits that we have. And 2 years went by, and one day in 2005, my father woke up and he saw a sky sweeper, which is a battle ear eagle, and my father nicknamed them Sky Sweeper.
Hmm.
A battle ear eagle, he loved them, and it's actually our logo in Kenya. If I were to show you Bridges Exploration,
Yeah.
which is the company,
Okay. Yeah.
our logo in there is a battle ear eagle with its upswept wings, because my father called it Sky Sweeper because they just sort of sweep the sky. They're great gliders, and they don't flap their wings very much at all. And he always believed that whenever Sky Sweeper were to sweep over the mine site, that we would have good luck. On top of that, my father just woke up with a feeling, and he said, you know what? I think that we should go back to the Scorpion 2 tunnel, and I feel that we'll get something there. And so we went back to Scorpion 2, and I was saying, no, Dad, I don't think that's a good idea. You know, it was barren for months and months and months, and we wasted so much money going through the barren zone. I think that I don't think that's a good idea. And he's like, no, we're going back. And within a foot of where we had left off 2 years prior, we hit this once in a lifetime pocket that yielded these 25,000 carats of faceted gem material. So it goes to show what I know, right? But either way.
But that's always like the scary story of mining, that you stop and then you sell the mine, and the next person does one little hit, and 2 feet away, they hit this huge pocket.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, I never claimed to be the best geologist in the world. But but the thing is, within a foot, we hit this pocket, and we actually had friends from overseas visiting, and they were there, and we caught it on film, and it was just it was, you couldn't have scripted it in a movie better than it was.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're all elated with what happened. But unfortunately, later, a little bit after that, an article came out, and I'm not blaming them for this, but we did notice problems happening after this happened. But an article came out in Drum Magazine where which was a local magazine in Kenya, and they mentioned that a Tsavorite, a very large Tsavorite, was selling for 100 billion shillings. And at the time, 100 billion shillings would have been over like $1 billion. Okay. And it was just one stone, and they were saying all of this. And again, I don't blame them at all. And that quote is wrong. And I mean, as you know, things.
Sensationalism.
I mean, sensationalism.
But the numbers were off.
Yeah, the numbers are off by many factors, but it's something that it sounds great to say, right? And you get readers for sure. But we had always had issues with banditry and that sort of thing, and poachers and bandits and mine raids and that sort of thing. But what we had happen that started in early 26 was, in a nutshell, you had 2 local politicians who teamed up with a well-known local gangster, as well as a local family there, and they decided they want what we had, and they figured the best way to get it was to force us off the claims, right? So they started on an encroachment operation where they set up illegal mining camps on our concessions, and they started to mine. And they started at Leopard Hill, which is the start of our mining concession. And it's a beautiful hill. I love that hill. And a leopard used to sun himself on this big rock. It almost looks like the Lion King rock, and survey the savanna beneath him. And that's where they started. And then ended up just popping up little illegal mining camps all over our concession. And whenever we would go, they would to investigate what was going on. They would threaten us, et cetera, et cetera. And we they could see after a while that we weren't going to be scared away, no matter what their threats were. And my father did everything legally through the right channels, where we would go to the Ministry of Mines in Kenya. They would be issued eviction notices, et cetera, et cetera. That went on for 3 years. And after 3 years in 2009, when they saw that they couldn't scare us away, and when we had taken it so far in the Kenyan government that the government finally issued an eviction notice, that's when everything really came to a head and blew up.
Okay, so the event that we're talking about is the event that happened on August 11th in 2009. And I remember Blue Cap Productions was around there. And when I heard news of it, I certainly had never met you at the time, and I didn't know your father. I had heard of him. But when I heard of what happened down there, I was shocked, as was the entire mineral world. And tell us about that day. Let's start with like the very beginning of that morning. What happened, or what was the day like when you first woke up with your father on August 11th?
Sure. So on it was all extremely well planned. I have to give them that. You know, they thought ahead.
It
And
was it was very premeditated.
yeah,
And
yeah.
from the details I've heard from you and the reports I've read, there's no doubt that it was not premeditated, that it was planned from the very beginning.
Yeah, so I mean, it was very well planned. They actually started some weeks earlier, where they kidnapped two of our patrol Ascaris on our concession, who were patrolling our concession, and then then when they kidnapped them, they actually took them to court and said that that they were trespassing, right?
Mm.
And it was really well thought out, because once you have that, you start a court case. And that court case means you have to appear for summons, right? So it was really well thought out. And we went to court that morning, and it was my father, myself, and the two Ascari that had to be at the mention, then our two head of security. And then while we were in the courts, we were getting calls from locals all over the place, and they were warning us, hey, don't go back to the mine. You're going to, we're hearing word that they're building roadblocks and you're going to be ambushed, and they're spitting fire was the actual direct translation.
Mm.
And we told the head of police there what was going on. He said that he would call it in, etc. Then after the court case was over, the decision came, do we head back or not? And we had a tour group that was meant to meet us at the mine at about 3:30 p.m., right? So my father said, well, let's go back, because that tour group is going to run into that ambush, and we can't let that. We can't
And
let
Bruce, I
that.
want to point out to everybody that despite the very real threats and the proof that you were getting from all your friends sending you messages, the safety of the tour group still remained utmost in your father's mind. And possibly that was the main reason why he decided to go for all of you to return to the mine.
Yeah, and so I said, okay, well, let's at least go to the police and get an escort to go with us.
Mhm.
And so Dad said, okay, we can go down. So we went to the station. The whole station was locked. There was no one at the police station. And keep in mind, we knew all the guys in charge, so we had their numbers. Everybody's phones was off. The
Mm.
entire police station was locked. Like if you can imagine a whole town's police station, there's not a soul in sight, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, Dad, you could just go back to Nairobi and we get guys from Nairobi and we go down. He's like, what about the tour group? He's like,
Mhm.
tour group goes back, they run into the ambush. I'm not going to let that happen. So we said, okay. And then we drove back and I was originally driving the car, but before we got onto our concession, my dad said, I want to take over, you know. And keep in mind, at that time, I was 30 years old, so
Right.
I definitely would have been fit to do it. But
But he was still
uh,
your father. He needed to, his, he was in very strong protective mode at that point.
yeah. And keep in mind, he was 2 weeks shy of his 72nd birthday.
Hmm.
So I'm basically prime of my life. But
Right.
either way, that was my dad. And then we got there and there was a huge roadblocks, big trenches and huge rocks across the road. We cut our way around it and kept going. And then right as we came parallel to GG2, which was Green Garnet 2, so that was one of the original Green Garnet mines, which was where they were actively mining illegally and getting production. Um, there was a huge tree across the road. I mean, this tree was enormous. And keep in mind, there were six of us, including my father and I. And this tree was just a huge hardwood tree that
Hmm.
they had cut, and it would have taken dozens of men to drag that thing across the road. And he stopped maybe 10 meters before the tree, and we got out to investigate how we could get around this tree because it went deep into the bush on both sides. I'm thinking, do we cut it in half? We don't have any power tools, no chainsaws or anything like that. And right when we're exploring the bush around to try and see how we get around it, um, we saw a group of maybe 12 people rushing from behind us, yelling and screaming in Swahili, "We've come to kill you," etc., etc.
I've heard bits and pieces of that story, but I've never heard it in such detail. And I know that it's still emotionally very, very raw for you, and I imagine will be for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
And
it is interesting because anybody who knows me knows I'm not really an emotional individual. And it hasn't really gotten easier. I don't know why. It's been 15 years, almost 16 years, and I'm not an emotional guy. Like my wife would probably say I need to be more emotional, right? But on that one thing, it hasn't gotten easier. I don't know.
but I mean, this is a thing that I don't think I know anybody in the world that has gone through a similar experience. So it's really hard for people who haven't gone through that experience to comment on it. Um, every time I hear you tell the story, I see you getting choked up. And, I lost my father and I still think very fondly of him. And it has to be the exact same for you, but even more so. So, yes, please continue to embrace that sensitivity in you. And I love seeing that it still touches you so deeply because he made such a big impact on you, guided your life so much, and it was such really a nightmare situation that fortunately you survived, but it wasn't something that you heard about in stories. You were there in person and experienced it firsthand, and I can't imagine what that must have been like.
No, thank you. I mean, I think anytime you lose a father, it's terrible. And I know our fathers were friends, so
Yeah.
it's it's nice to carry on family friendship and legacy, right?
Absolutely. So after that happened, the mine closed down for 5 years.
Hmm.
And during that 5 years, you identified 25 of the assailants and you went after them legally, and a ruling was handed down. What did that ruling say, and what message did that send to you?
5.5 years, and I spent more money on that trial. I could have retired many times over.
I can
But
imagine. But it was the kind of thing that you weren't going to let go.
yeah, look, I will never let it go.
Yeah.
But the ringleaders we were able to bring to court, and then to make a long story short, of those eight, four ended up getting off, and then four ended up uh, getting a 40-year sentence. So basically a life sentence. I mean,
Life sentence.
40 years in committee, in Shimolatewa, not committee, that's even worse. 40 years in Shimolatewa is not the easiest stint.
Well, in 2000, I believe it was 16, you reopened the mine. And I think these images are of you at the Scorpion in 2016. Is that correct?
Yeah, so these photos are from 2016. We actually reopened the mine in 2015. We
2015. Okay.
invented, we invested a huge amount of money into reopening the mine. Because keep in mind, a mine that's been dormant, we do upkeep, but like the tunnels and everything else, and infrastructure, we had to completely revamp. So something that's been dormant for 5.5 years, it took a great deal of investment to revamp it. We revamped the mine, put a ton of money in there. And then these photos, yeah, that's 2016. So that's Scorpion Mine number 4. So interestingly, Komori on the left there, it was kind of a cool story because Komori's been with us for 39 years.
Wow.
And so
These are like lifelong positions that these workers
yeah. I
have with
mean,
you.
I mean, our least tenure on our pocketing team is 15 years. Our overall manager in Kenya, we're the same age, and he started right after high school. So he's been with us for like 26 years. Our head of security, the same. Our mine manager has been with us closing on 3 decades, almost 30 years. Komori on the left, he actually started when I was 6. I'm sorry. So he's been with us 40 years now because I just turned 46. So the thing is, the cool thing for me though is when I took my kids last year, and my little guy was 7, and Kimori knew me since I was 6. So that was heartwarming to me, right? Because he saw me at 6, and then he saw my son at basically the same age. So that's
I
something
love it.
else.
It's really like the circle of life. It's happening all over again.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And here we got a couple shots of you underground.
Yeah, so Joseph in the background, he's our mine manager there, and he's been with us. He's been with us since the early 90s. So again, we're looking at quarter century-ish amount of time. So all of these guys have known me since I was a kid, basically.
I love it. And who is this gentleman in the green hat?
So that's Ben. He's actually a South African guy that we brought up for the revamp, and he was a blasting expert. So we were doing a lot of blasting when we reopened, and we brought him up from South Africa. So he wasn't a long-standing guy, and he just came up for basically that year and a half. So it's something that he's not part of the permanent crew, but he was a great guy and had great expertise. A lot of those South African guys are fantastic miners with great expertise.
Super. Now, Bruce, a little window probably came up on your screen. You're actually not supposed to read that, so
Oh,
you could ignore that.
okay.
Um, what is the status of the Scorpion mine today?
So the status of the mine today. So invested a whole ton of money in 15, going through 16. We were left alone. We were allowed to revamp and set up.
Hmm.
And then June 2016, we didn't get our mining licenses or mineral licenses renewed. So they didn't get revoked. They just are in process. So basically, we were left alone for a year and a half because the trial ended end of 2014. We were left alone for about 18 months. And then they figured, okay, well, and I'm surmising here, but I think it's fairly accurate. They surmised, okay, well, we can't scare these guys off. We're having trouble killing these guys off. So let's just wait them out, because to have a mine is a very um, costly venture. You have sunk costs every month. You have employees. You have upkeep, et cetera, et cetera. So they're like, well, we can't revoke the licenses because he'll take us to court and he'll win, and he'll sue the Kenyan government.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, John Saul actually did that in the 70s and won. Um,
Okay. So there was
but
precedent there.
there is a little precedent for that. But what they did is instead, they're like, we just won't renew the mining or mineral dealer's license. And now, if you're running an artisanal or illegal operation, hey, you just keep going and mining. But I mean, we're an international company that runs things professionally, and if we don't have mining and mineral dealers licenses, we're not mining, because that would be illegal if one is following the law.
And that's what they're
And
hoping you do.
yeah, I mean, they hope I do. Because the other thing too is, let's say I did mine and I come across a big pocket, okay? So you're investing all this money every month, mine, 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 mine. Maybe you go through Barren Zone, but you mine, mine, mine. Let's say you get some great production. Nothing travels faster than Bush Telegram, and everybody's going to know within a couple hours. Then the authorities could come down and be like, hey, you're mining illegally and we're confiscating everything and we're shutting you down, right?
Yeah.
And they'll just take everything. And you've been how many $1 million in the hole by running the operation. And then they would have cause to say, well, he mined illegally, so that's why he got kicked out, right? Or
Hmm.
that's why the licenses got revoked. So now we are 2025. So we are 9 years this month of not being able to deal in gems and minerals in the country that I'm from, in Kenya, because my mineral dealer's license hasn't been renewed. No matter, even though I've paid for it, done all the paperwork multiple times, and also my mining license hasn't been renewed. So I haven't let go of one permanent employee. I keep all of my permanent staff. I haven't changed one guy. I've actually given people raises. I haven't dropped their salaries. Still look after every single one of my father's permanent employees. I still keep the mine in immaculate condition. And we had guests come last year. Our somewhere in the Rainbow family, Shelley Surgeon, if everybody knows her, she came last year
Hmm.
with Todd, her husband, and several other friends. And I think they'll attest that I've kept it as close to my father's wishes as humanly possible. And I have not mined one gemstone in Kenya since 2016. So
Wow.
for me, it's just outlay, and they're just trying to wait me out. I'm sure they're just sitting back there. They're like, "This guy's insane. What is he doing? He's not mining anything, and he's just burning money every month." My wife would say the same, but either way, so maybe they do have something in common, right? Everybody thinks I'm a madman, I guess. But the thing is, I've resigned myself to the fact that I don't believe I'll ever be allowed to mine in Kenya again. So what I've offered the Kenyan government is the following. I've said, and I've put it in writing, signed, sealed, delivered, that if they allow me to create a national heritage, if they grant me national heritage site status at the mine, I will create a national heritage site and an elephant sanctuary, which was always my father's wish. And I can show you letters from the 1980s where my father wanted to set up an elephant sanctuary at the mine, because we're right in the elephant migratory route from Tanzania into Tsavo National Park. So they all come through our mine. And we have about 2,000 acres there. And when we were there, and I could send you flyovers, drone flyovers, we had herds of 70, 80 elephant. And
Wow.
my father always wanted to set up an elephant sanctuary. So my agreement, what I've offered is I will cease all mining operations in the country, and I will donate the Scorpion mine and all of my mining concessions if they allow me to create an elephant sanctuary there, and as well as a national heritage site. And the national heritage site would protect it from the bad guys coming in and mining.
Right.
And as well as Tsavorite's Kenya's national gemstone. The Scorpion mine is the single largest, most famous Tsavorite mine in the world. And it's something that if I was able to do that, it would offer employment to my employees, and it would be a great thing, I would think, for the country. You bring in tourism, you bring people to the country, you raise the international visibility of, mining can be good and the right thing can be done.
Right.
And I'm willing to donate it all, and as well as put a lot of my own money, as well as I have some big backers as well who would put money in too, fund it all. And the deal is, what I've offered is that every cent that the sanctuary or heritage site would make would simply go into the maintenance of the sanctuary and site. And that my only ask is that I'm allowed to visit it with my family, and it's named after my father.
Of course.
And that's it. That's my only ask. Otherwise, it's a complete donation, and we'll create all of this. And we're going on quite a bit of time now since the offer's been made. Haven't no acceptance, and they just continue to stonewall me out.
Okay, so you
And
are the newly.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's the other thing. People think that just because Tsavorite is there, you just stick a shovel in the ground and a river of green comes flowing out, right? And you just make billions. It doesn't work at all like that.
People don't understand mining.
Yeah, exactly. My father, in my opinion, was the finest hard rock geologist in Africa. And to see what he had to go through in order to make it a success, I mean, I wouldn't be confident in myself doing that. And for people who aren't professionals to think that they can just come in and run an operation, you'll turn a place like that into Swiss cheese in a couple weeks to a month, destroy the place, and then it'll be nothing but a sad remembrance of a tragedy, as opposed to Kenya might actually have a chance for the happiest ending that could be in such a situation.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you the best. I hope eventually that offer is accepted. Recently, you were elected president of the American Gem Trade Association, the AGTA.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what's the future of Tsavorite?
Future Tsavorite, I mean, it's my life's mission to carry on my father's legacy, right? And to see his dream for Tsavorite come true. And much of it has come true. If you look at Tsavorite's price, it's gone up. It's gone up literally 1,000% in larger sizes since we lost my father, which is exactly what he said would happen. And Tsavorite now is one of the most sought after colored gemstones on earth. Problem is supply. There's not much supply, but when you kill literally the father of Tsavorite, supply is going to drop. So as far as the future of Tsavorite, I will certainly do everything in my power throughout my life to raise public awareness of Tsavorite and to make Tsavorite be the fruition of my father's dream for his gem. And I think it has an extraordinarily bright future. And if one looks at where Tsavorite has gone to since the loss of my father, it's something that I think it's only going to keep going. I mean, every major jewelry house in the world uses Tsavorite now. Every major watchmaker in the world uses Tsavorite now. In fact, if anybody's a big watch fan, I was very pleased to see that Audemars Piguet, AP, for the 50th anniversary of the Royal Oak, which is their most famous watch, they actually chose 10 gemstones to create the 50th anniversary Royal Oak, and they chose Tsavorite as one of the 10.
Fantastic.
And I mean, when you've achieved that sort of level, and when Ronaldo is wearing a Jacob and Company Tsavorite watch on his private jet, and that appears in Robb Report, I mean, that's pretty cool to see, you know, as a little boy growing up in the middle of nowhere, you know, to see what my dad did. I'm very proud of that.
I love it. And you should be. Bruce, final question before we go into our Quickfire 5. What's the most important piece of advice your father ever gave to you?
Ooh. My father gave me a lot of important advice. As far as, I think one of the most important lessons would be the secret to eternal life, and that's family. And the fact that my father, through his love and caring of his family, not really gone, right?
No. As long as you still have that love for him inside of your heart, he will live on forever.
Exactly. And even in my kids, I have 3 kids, 3 little kids, as you know. And in them, I see parts of him. And then I teach them. Now, whether or not they go into the business or not, who knows? But they travel with me to gem areas all over the world for the unveiling of the Lion of Merlani, which was a donation to the Smithsonian. And it's the finest Tsavorite in any museum in the world, and will be by the Hope Diamond through the rest of the time. I take them to the unveiling, and they're front and center with Kirk Johnson, who's the Sant director of the Smithsonian, my mom, for the unveiling, you know. And it's something like that, I mean, that's the secret to eternal life right there, is your family and the love and caring that you have for your family. You truly can live forever. And absolutely, I would say that is probably the most important lesson that my father ever taught me.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I feel the exact same way. For me, family is everything. I travel around the world doing the things for Blue Cap Productions, but everybody knows that when I come home, and especially on the weekends, I shut down. That's family time.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Bruce, we're going to go I think this is the first show we've ever done. So far, we're at 2 hours, 10 minutes, and we're not done yet.
I'm
But I
sorry
love
about
it.
that.
I love it. And I don't know if I specifically planned this when I knew Raquel wasn't going to be with us, but I love it. We're going to go
I
to
think
our
you
quick
did,
fire
Brian.
five.
I think you
Yeah,
did.
I think so too. Raquel actually sent me a text message, sent us a text message asking how the program went about 40 minutes ago. And I said, went? It's still going.
I'm sorry about that, guys.
No, Bruce. It's been my pleasure, and I knew it was going to go long, and I loved it. So we have the freedom to do that. Okay, we're going to go to our quick fire five. So Bruce, I have 5 questions here, and I'm going to give you 2 options for answers. I want you to give me which answer you resonate with most strongly. The viewers have already seen these questions, and they've taken a poll to try to guess what your answers are. All of your answers are correct. Let's see how well our viewers
just remember,
do.
I don't speak or think that quickly, so I'll do my best.
And in the South, they used to say, "Oh, bless his soul, that slow boy." All right. Question number 1: favorite vacation destination, African savanna or beachside cabin?
Oh, that's easy. African savanna.
See? Well, these questions are pretty easy, huh? Question number 2: favorite mascot, Wildcats or Friday?
It's got to be Friday.
Question number 3: favorite desert animal, scorpion or rattlesnake?
Easily scorpion.
Question number 4: favorite sport, baseball or track and field?
That's a tricky
that's a tough one.
Because for me personally, definitely track and field, but my boys are baseball players.
I know it. I did my research.
But my family history is track and field, so I'm going with track and field.
You're going to go with track and field. All right. Final question. Are you ready for this? Are you seated? Oh, yeah.
Am I sitting down, seated?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, of course you are. You've been so for 2 hours. Okay.
I'm rather short, if not, no.
Which animal do you resonate with most strongly, elephant or lion?
I would say lion.
I was hoping you'd say that. Okay. Who's Rachel or Eloise? Or Eloise, you're gonna do the quick fire 5?
Sure, let's go.
Okay. Question number 1: favorite vacation destination, African savanna or beach cabin? Without a hesitation, Bruce went with African savanna. What did our viewers say?
Well, it's a big spoiler. People have been following, so I can tell you already the answers. All the answers are really obviously completely right. So yes, African savanna.
Okay. Favorite mascot, Wildcats or Friday?
Friday.
I thought maybe some would go with the Wildcats.
No, people are following. People are following.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Desert animal, scorpion or rattlesnake? If you've been paying attention, has to be rattlesnake. Favorite sport, baseball, track and field? Bruce went with track and field. Okay. And the final one, resonate with most strongly, elephant or lion?
Well, lion. People got it right as well. So
lion. And for those who are unaware, elephant and lion is reference to the stone that is over Bruce's right shoulder, the Lion of Marilani. Bruce, tell us real quickly about that stone.
So that particular gem was a Tsavorite that was mined in 2017, and it was mined in Marilani, Tanzania, and that's a picture of the rough. So in rough form, I thought it would be cool, as I think most of our viewership here might be mineral lovers. This is in rough form, and don't kill me. As you can see, it's not fully euhedral, clean faces. So it was gem material to be cut, but it did have a few faces on there, as one can see. But just almost loop clean piece of rough that was, again, almost 60 grams, almost 300 carats. And this particular gem was so big that we couldn't cut it in-house. And we've cut in-house since the late 70s. And we always prided ourselves on being a completely vertically integrated company from mine to market, doing all of our processing in-house and keeping the value in country of origin with cutting material in country of origin. However, this particular stone was too big for us to process. So I sought the skill set of Viktor Tuzlakov, who is a Russian grandmaster cutter, and he specializes in large gemstones. I carbon copied his cutting facility. He lives in Thailand. I carbon copied his cutting facility in Thailand to my office here in Arizona, and I had him come out. We planned the cutting of this stone for many, many months, and to my knowledge, it's the first, certainly the first Tsavorite, and I believe most likely the first colored gemstone to be cut utilizing really diamond technology. So I said to myself, when we cut it, who does the best cutting in the world? And that would be the diamond sector. So we fully 3D mapped this stone, and the sarin scanners in the US that they utilize for diamonds weren't large enough for this piece of rough. So Victor had to actually utilize his Russian contacts in order to get a full 3D mapping of this stone. Yeah. And then we utilized GemCAD software and several other proprietary softwares that Victor uses in order to 3D model the different cuts and patterns, light, return, weight yield, etc., that the stone would produce during cutting, as well as the fact that I was very adamant I wanted a square cushion cut, as that's my favorite shape and also the rarest shape for Tsavorite. So I wanted something that had never been done before. So it took 3-4 months of planning. And then Victor came to my office here in Arizona, and over the course of a little over a month, he cut this gem, and it's all fully documented. I'm still working on the documentary, which I also have to provide the Smithsonian. But once the stone was done, it yielded 116.76 carat Tsavorite. It's the first Tsavorite in history. First square cushion cut Tsavorite in history over 100 carats. It's the largest precision cut Tsavorite in history. It's the largest Tsavorite ever cut in North America, and it's also the finest Tsavorite in any museum around the world. And then once it was cut, I teamed up with our Somewhere in the Rainbow family, and we donated the stone in my father's honor to the Smithsonian. And if you were to visit the Smithsonian today, you'll see, and it was unveiled in 2023. If you were to visit the Smithsonian today, it's right next to the Hope Diamond, where it will be until the end of time. And it was named for the locale in which it was mined, which was Marilani, as well as after my father. My father was known as the Lion. So the name that it was bequeathed was the Lion of Marilani.
I absolutely love it. And that is the cut stone that's over your right shoulder. Yeah. And there's also a common theme with this stone, because you and I, Bruce, first met, I think right before you handed this off to Victor. I was filming at the Granada Gallery, and you brought this by, and I filmed this rotating for you.
Exactly. And you're very kind to do that. And I still have that video, then that will be utilized in the documentary. So I have a small segment of it right now, but when I do the full doc, I'll be sure to let you know.
Beautiful. I'd love to see that. All right. We're going to go to the questions and answer section. So Eloise, take it away. Do our viewers have
very
questions?
Quickly, Brian. Okay.
Look how dark it is in Eloise's house.
Yeah, it's 9:20 p.m.
I'm sorry, it is nighttime in France. Yeah.
All right. Does Tsavorite occur with chrome dioxide? That's a question from Evan.
The Tsavorite occur with chrome dioxide rarely, very rarely.
Really? Okay. A question from Paul. Are there any known alluvial deposits of Tsavorite?
Alluvial deposits of Tsavorite? Sure,
Mhm.
there definitely have been alluvial finds of Tsavorite. You have to remember where Tsavorite's formation occurred in Leucostrine conditions, so it was all an old sea basically. So you definitely will find you can find Tsavorite in the soil layer without getting to primary. So you'll find Tsavorite in eluvium and alluvium as well. So honestly, all the biggest that I can think of have all been found in primary host rock, but there's been some fabulous pieces were found in alluvium.
Excellent, thank you. Question from Gary. Hi, Gary. Was the Zimbabwe deposit of Tsavorite ever worth mining?
It's still there, and I don't tell people where it is because Zimbabwe's had a lot of issues. And it's not something that I'm interested in going to pursue because of obvious problems there. I mean, as bad as I might say things are in Kenya, it's way worse there. So it's something that it's hard to answer, but the Mozambique belt, which is the geological formation that the vast majority of the finest colored gems in Africa occur within, and it touches Mozambique, goes up through Madagascar, Tanzania, Kenya, into Sudan and Ethiopia. I mean, you could find Tsavorite anywhere along that line. So it's something that in Zim, it very well could be. No one has investigated it or, to my knowledge, found where Dad originally found those pieces, but it's not something that I'm interested in pursuing, at least not at this juncture time in my life.
I understand that the glorious Mozambique belt definitely has a lot of things to get out of. A lot of good things, a lot of gems. The next question, I didn't understand that one, but maybe you will. Does the Marinali Hills material retain fluorescence after being prepared and faceted? So I don't really understand what does...
So to answer that question, it's not just Tsavorite from Marilani that can fluoresce.
Okay, yeah.
So Tsavorite from Kenya okay, so Taita in Kenya, where we are, which is southern Kenya, can fluoresce. Tsavorite from where Dad originally discovered Tsavorite, outside of Kimolo, which is now Lemshuku, that can also fluoresce, as well as the material from Marilani. What you have to remember is if Tsavorite, the chromophores in Tsavorite are chromium and vanadium. Generally, the higher chromium content material has no iron or less iron. And material with higher iron kills all fluorescence. So it's not like every piece from Marilani will fluoresce. I've seen pieces from Marilani with very high iron content, and they don't fluoresce at all. But I've seen pieces from Marilani that, even though they're light color, they'd have very high chromium content, and generally higher chromium content in Tsavorite will yield more of that blue secondary hue to the grain. And Rossman has done several studies on that where we gave him samples, and that was basically the finding there as well. As well as there's several other people working on that study right now, but that was what Dad always said, and it's just been reinforced in labs whenever testing has been done. But Tsavorite can have iron in it, which will kill fluorescence. But I've seen Marilani material that was lighter material, but still had high chromium, just low vanadium, and had then absence of iron, and that material definitely fluoresced.
Yeah. But really to answer Evan's question, like if Tsavorite had fluorescence as a rough material, it will still have a fluorescence when it's prepared and
yeah, I don't know why that would change.
Yes,
there's
right?
nothing that I can think of that would change the fluorescence. If it was fluorescing in rough, it will fluoresce in
right. Okay.
hot.
Okay, thanks for the detailed answer. Thank you. And Julian, you're still here. Julian, hi again. But maybe that's good. That's going to be for another time. He's asking if you can tell the story of the buffalo and the Peugeot truck. But
Ooh,
I think
wow.
that's going to be for Tucson, right?
Yeah,
Let's talk about that in Tucson around
perhaps I don't
like
know how
June.
much time you have, but that's an interesting story.
All right, I'll definitely ask you in October when we see each other in Paris.
Good. I look
Thanks,
forward
Julian,
to
for the
it.
tip.
It'll be a fun trip.
All right,
Beautiful. Well,
guys.
then, Bruce, thank you for joining us. As I always think about you, this photo will come to mind of you kind of looking out over the savannah and keeping an eye on what's going on with the scorpion mine down in Kenya. And as tradition dictates, we're going to end with one final image. And Bruce, I want you to talk us through this image.
Sure. So just so everybody knows, the previous image was Leopard Hill, which is the hill that I mentioned the leopard used to sun himself on. And then anybody who's seen me present or lecture before knows I always end with this video. I mean, with this photo, and I call this Touch the Sky. And it's my favorite photo of my father and I call it Touch the Sky because whenever I was with my father, I always felt that I could touch the sky.
And Bruce, I know in your heart, your father is still alive with you, and I am positive that he would be very proud of you and your continuing efforts to touch the sky. So thank you again so much for being on the show and for opening up so much and sharing with us. I really, really, truly appreciate that.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the interest, and thank you for keeping my father's legacy alive.
Absolutely.
Through your caring.
You probably didn't have the opportunity, but we had so many comments on the chat. People were really touched, and yeah, a lot of messages. Probably we can get you the transcript from the chat because it's really worth it.
I'd love to see that. I'd love that. Thank you.
We'd love to share that with you. Okay, Bruce, again, thank you so much. For all you viewers out there, thank you for tuning in to this. I think this is now the record-breaking session of Mineral Talks Live, and I want to thank Bruce for that. I want to thank all you viewers for hanging out, which is coming up on 2.5 hours now. And I invite you all to come back July 2nd. It is our 100th show, and we've got something special planned for you. So all of you, embrace the aloha in your life. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.